أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين. In the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful, all praise is due to Allah, the Lord of all the worlds. We welcome our friends in South Africa, the United States, and around the world to this week's edition of A Conversation with El-Hajj, Mauri, Saalakhan. I'm pleased to be your host, coming to you once again through the Salam Media Network out of Johannesburg, South Africa. Salam Media is an online portal for humanitarian journalism. We don't just report the news, we advise you on what you can do about it. Today's broadcast is titled Family DIS-UNIFICATION, one of the great challenges of our time. Now, the program that I originally had planned for today took a more broad and political turn as a result of some important and, in my humble opinion, time-sensitive discourse in social media land following the release of the British Muslim journalist Sami Hamdi. Our return guest for today's conversation has been a prominent voice within the realm of that discourse. And with that being said, I want to begin today's broadcast with our brother Imam Yusuf Rios sharing some thought-provoking information, just sharing his thoughts in his mobile office. Let's see that video, Brother Sadiq.
Bismillah walhamdulillah wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah. I wanted to make a brief comment on a statement that was issued by our brother Sami Hamdi recently with regard to his detention.
In half a mile, turn right onto Riggs Avenue.
He said that it was an attack. He said that it was an attack not just on him, but on the freedoms of the American people in general.
At the next stop sign, turn right.
The freedom to speak against hatred. And in general, I say, yes, we agree that it was an attack, but this is not a new attack. That's just, the reality is that this is not a new attack. This is something that has been taking place for quite a long time.
Turn left onto Canal Street.
Now, one of the issues that we confront is, and this needs to really be expanded on further, some people don't like to hear it, but one of the things that we need to confront is that our continued...
In a quarter mile, take a slight right turn onto Main Street.
Our continued denial of the experience of the indigenous people of this country, which is blacks and browns, will not give us a solid understanding. That denial will not give us a solid understanding of how the system works, right? We will constantly be confused. We will constantly be confused. And so it's like this reality, a lot of us expected it, right? And it happens quite often that we become excited. Some of us become excited about changing the system or bringing about change and so on and so forth, but we really don't have a solid understanding.
Go past the street, then take a slight right turn onto Main Street.
By experience of how the system works. And this is why I've mentioned to some people,
take a slight
and
right
I hope that they
Main Street.
hear this live, that the contribution of the immigrant community is not the same contribution as the indigenous community, and they don't understand what I mean by that. They get offended by that.
Riggs Avenue, then the destination is on your right.
And what it means is that there's been a struggle that has been ongoing.
The destination is on your right.
There's been a struggle that has been ongoing for a number of generations. Just like in Palestine, the same thing in the U.S. And so there's a certain type of experience and understanding how the power dynamic works in this country within that context, right? And so then what was experienced is discrimination. What was experienced is an abuse of power. What was experienced is the way that the white supremacist system works. what was experienced is systemic. So when some of us come and we start denying systemic racism, we start denying the way that oppression operates here. We say that these are liberal ideas, these are Marxist ideas, and we really have no clue how those positions were constructed except what we were told, because we're not in those circles of analysis and experience. Let this experience that Sammy went through inform you that you're still learning how the system unfolds and how it operates and how its tentacles, they take hold. And then let's get back to the drawing board and regroup and understanding our position. And we're very happy, alhamdulillah, that our brother Sammy is free. But may everyone else be free as well. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Okay, on that note, we want to go to our first commercial break so that we can have some uninterrupted conversation with our brother. We'll see you on the other side, inshallah.
It's a wonder how kids get anything done these days. With all the distractions, when do they even get time to study? As a mother, all I can really do is make sure they have all they need to perform at their best. That's why I choose to include Sunfoil triple refined pure sunflower oil with every meal I make. Naturally cholesterol-free and approved by the Heart and Stroke Foundation as part of a balanced eating plan. So whether I'm cooking, frying or baking, I know every dish will be a wholesome one. Sunfoil, now we're cooking.
World-class financial services only at Sapphire Global, your financial partner. If you are looking for Islamic, Sharia, and ethical financial products, look no further. Sapphire Global offers a wide range of financial service offerings from short-term to life and investments. A full-service center with all financial requirements under one brand. Our highly skilled and experienced consultants are ready to help protect your financial future. Contact us on 041 001 0184 or visit our website on www.sapphireglobalfs.com. Sapphire Global is an authorized financial services provider.
Gaza needs your support more than ever. Homes have been shattered and families have lost everything. With your support, our teams are delivering clean water tankers, feeding the hungry, and assisting orphans who have no one left. Let us give Gaza whatever help we can. African Muslims Agency, empowering, educating, inspiring.
Breaking stereotypes, moving boundaries, joining hands. Salam Media. Humanity sets the agenda.
Welcome back. Our topic for today is titled the challenges facing families, the familial challenge that we as Muslims are being confronted with today, and specifically the disunification, the disunity that we find within families as a result of all of the pressures, the different types of pressures that are exerting themselves upon not only the nuclear family unit, but the broader family construction as well. And in fact, today like I said, originally my intent was to deal with what is commonly referred to as the nuclear family and the pressures, the challenges revolving around this nucleus of society. And that's what the family is at its heart, that, the family construction at its very basic level is the nucleus of human society. And initially I wanted to deal with this today, but then, I had a change of heart as a result of two things. One, not being as fully prepared for that conversation as I wanted to be, but also because of the enormous amount of attention that's been given, understandably, to the detention and then the release of our brother Sami Hamdi, a British Muslim journalist who's had, quite a few visits to the United States over the past year or two. He's had quite a few visits, and he's become very well known. He's well respected, but he has had some positions that have been, for some of us, a bit problematic. And our brother Imam Yusuf Rios has been within his social media addressing, raising and addressing some of those issues from his perspective. And I just thought that, given all that we are witnessing and experiencing right now, both here and abroad, I thought the broader conversation on family, on the family in the macro sense, especially as it pertains to Muslims, is something that we could deal with today. So without any further ado, let's welcome my brother to today's conversation, Imam Yusuf Rios. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Okay, my brother, let's begin with that piece of video that you did, that we just shared. Let's start there. What is it that prompted you to do that video? And you did it in your, like I said, in your mobile office, which is where we often find you. And you raised a number of issues that I'm quite certain you had far more to say about. But your time then was limited. Our time today is limited, but not as limited as it was when you were en route to wherever you were en route to. So let's expound on that, brother. On the thoughts that you shared and the concerns that you've been expressing through social media over the past few days.
Bismillah wa alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah. I wanted to honor and appreciate the topic that you had selected and kind of tie into that as well. We've been on this show and have been blessed with the South African community to kind of dialogue on the changes that have been taking place within the system itself. And one of the things that we, many of us, note is that there is a transformation taking place on the geopolitical level with the way that especially Western countries are dealing with immigration. And most of the times when we talk about immigration, we at times fail to address that it has everything to do with the family. People don't leave their countries of origin or places that they feel at home or comfortable in, except in many cases under dire circumstances or with the intention of improving their condition. So what we're seeing with the transformations in global capital and the political realities that countries are going through, whether it's civil issues or political disturbances or climate issues, people are being forced to migrate throughout the whole of the world. And at the same time that you have migration and immigration, you have countries that are at the forefront of wealth. They're closing their doors to the entry of these people. And so we're seeing policies instituted all over that are very nationalistic in origin, very ethnocentric, and very exclusive. So we have a dilemma where the family on the everyday level is watching inflation, is suffering lack of opportunity, and people are being forced to migrate, and then they come into these environments.
What's going on, man? What happened? Subhanallah. We lost our brother. I hope that we are still connected it appears that we are still connected on Salam Media. Inshallah ta'ala, we will get our brother back. I have been among those who have been, somewhat concerned about some of the positions that our brother Sami Hamdi has taken. Okay, our brother is back, so let's just continue. Let's pick up from where we left off. Can you hear me, brother? Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Alhamdulillah. Let's go ahead and pick up from where you left off.
So we're watching what's taking place with immigration and so on and so forth, and the pressures that are on the family. And we basically, I don't want to get into a very extended analysis, which is really needed so that we are grounded. But to simply put, look, people are struggling in today's time, and we're watching policies develop that are pretty much damaging to these families that are going through these economic and political issues that they're suffering and experiencing. And it's the same case with the Palestinian community. The Palestinian community has been suffering a lot of displacement and so on and so forth. So we have to be really careful with what kind of policies we're endorsing, because even though, like in this case, the case of Palestine, one of the things that we encounter is that, yes, we may be looking for the liberation of Palestine, but then where is the base for people? Like Palestinian refugees, where do they put their heads? If they can't put their heads down in Palestine, and we create an environment where immigration policy becomes so ethnocentric that is exclusive, where do they land? And it's the same thing with other immigrants. So we're finding that Muslims are aligning themselves more and more with nationalist discourses that in many instances are undermining our very freedoms or sense of justice, or even, they don't contribute to an environment which allows us to be able to even advocate for others, because we ourselves find ourselves limited on our civil liberties, because we are aligning and pushing nationalist policies which undermine ourselves.
Mm-hmm. And when you say we are aligning ourselves with and pushing nationalist policies, are you referring to, our nation as a whole, or are you now being specific about Muslims within our ranks also, giving sanction to these types of policies?
It's both. The nation, we're seeing that there's a push on a national level by certain elements within the system that are not Muslim. And we find that the Muslims, specifically, a segment of the Muslim community, in the case of the US, has inclined in that direction for a number of reasons. For a number of reasons. Palestine is just one reason, thinking that a nationalist sentiment will change foreign policy, which in the case of voting for Trump or Trump coming into power, it didn't change the foreign policy position. As a matter of fact, the situation of Palestine is just as bad as it was under Biden, or even worse. We're still seeing the same types of issues come up. Maybe some of the bombing lightened up, but there's still bombing going on. Now the West Bank is opened up as a problematic site for the Palestinians. There's incursions and all kinds of stuff in that regard. And we still have the refugee problem and all of that. So Muslims kind of pushed right wing for looking at the foreign policy issue, and also thinking that aligning with the right was a religious stance, that the right was more representative of morality and family values and so on and so forth. But what we're seeing is the opposite. What we're seeing is that
Right.
is economically policies are coming out which are destructive to the family. What we're seeing is that immigration wise policies are coming out which are destructive to the family. And so those are just some examples of real concern.
And yes, no question about it. These are genuine concerns that I have, among others, I've been beating the drums around for quite some time. In the lead up to the 2024 elections, I did my best to try to get folk within my orbit of influence to understand, both Muslims and non-Muslims, who were understandably upset with the Biden administration. Understandably upset, because Biden was, without question, an aider and abetter of genocide, without conscience. He is a lifelong Zionist. This is something that those of us who have been following, politics in this country and the way the political system has run, and the major players in different parts of the system, we've known this about Biden for many, many years. Going back to his days as a young senator, he's been a unrepentant Christian Zionist, and so the upset that was felt toward Biden and his policies was, it was understandable and it was justified. When he was still in the race, speaking for myself, when he was still in the race, when he was still in the running, before he made that decision to not to discontinue his run for re-election. When he was still in the race, my position was I could not vote for him or Trump, and I was going to. In fact, I was planning to vote, cast a vote for Professor Subhanallah, Cornel West. I was planning to send a protest vote his way. That's what I was planning to do when Biden was still in the running. But when he dropped out, there was no way I could directly or indirectly support a Trump return to the Oval Office. And so I was beating the drums around the that principle in Islamic law that gives us, and in fact, not just gives us the right, but advises us, encourages us, instructs us, to seek the path of less harm. And that clearly would have been Harris. I mean, it was clear to me. And so I was, throughout much of that campaign, the latter part of that campaign, needless to say, I felt very frustrated, but subhanAllah, I did what I could do. I made the argument that I could make, and at the end of the day, things ended up the way they did. Now, the thing that I find now disturbing for me personally, and I'd like to get your thoughts on this, the thing that I find disturbing is the inability of those who were beating the drums for support of Trump directly or indirectly. And when I say indirectly, what I mean is simply this. It is a known fact for those of us who know how this system operates that there were only two options. It was either Trump or Harris. They were the only two viable options. The other options that were available represented, symbolic protest kind of moves that could be taken, but the only viable options was Harris and Trump. And the thing that for me is disturbing is to this day is the inability of those who are still making the argument that a mistake wasn't made by not strategically selecting Harris as our opposition for the next 4 years. The inability of folk who are beating the drums for, directly or indirectly for Donald Trump, their inability to admit that a mistake was made. And the reason for admitting a mistake was made is so that we don't repeat the mistake again. We learn from it. So that's when I saw our brother Sami Hamdi in a couple of interviews share his thoughts on this aspect of the challenge that we are all now faced with, and him not, finding the wherewithal to say we made a mistake. I made a mistake, and with some of the rhetoric that I, engaged in that facilitated Trump coming back into power. For me, that it's problematic. I don't know about you, brother, but for me, it's quite problematic because, again, I think it's important for us to be able to admit our mistakes when we make them and learn from them, and encourage our brothers and sisters to learn from these mistakes so that we don't repeat them again and again and again. What are your thoughts?
I think when you come back to the involvement of the Muslims with the Democratic Party, it goes back some time. Part of it also was tied into the Muslims dealing with the neocons. There was this attempt to kind of go democratic to protect our existence in this country. But there was never really a demand made on the Democratic Party in the proper sense, meaning that the Muslims the approach that's being taken to politics is almost like a drive-through type of approach. It's an approach that, I put in my order, somebody has my order done, and I did my job, so to speak, and then I move on. I get what I want to get, and I get it fast, and that's it, and I don't have to put in any work. And so, or it's almost like having someone that is a maid for you, and you pay that person to clean up your house, and they do the work for you. There's no real involvement, and so we've had some involvement with the Democratic Party, but not a real involvement. And there's been some progress made in terms of we've had politicians that are Muslim come out of the Democratic Party, that are in Congress, that are in key positions, and so on and so forth. Rather than actually taking that to its ultimate of party politics, like really entering into that seriously, wholeheartedly, even if there's mistakes and issues, but we entered in. Part of our community that's entered in, we were voting that in that route. That has not been done. There's just been a lot of criticisms towards those that are in Congress, towards those that are at the local level. They don't represent Islam. That's the type of conversation that we have, not understanding that we're in a secular society. And this is more about weighing not only harm and benefit, but it's about constraining harm. It's about constraining harm. So the issue comes that we're not serious when it comes to party politics. Where does that show? With the abandoned Biden movement, which was not started by Muslims, it was started by non-Muslims. Muslims jumped on board. That was an opportunity to make high demands of the Democratic Party, to put very high demands into the Democratic Party. But what did the Muslim leadership do? It decided to play the abandoned Biden card and then push for realignment with a party that Muslims have no real experience with, and then there was no demands. So the vote was given to Trump either directly or indirectly by the stance that was taken, the type of maybe third party vote or whatever, or not voting at all. And so then the rhetoric that came from that, and this is kind of what disoriented me a little bit recently when I was listening to our brother Sammy. He was saying, "Oh, we pushed for Trump, and then then once we got Trump in, it was a punish vote for the Democratic Party. Then we're punishing them for genocide, that type of thing. Then we'll work against fascism." They knew that Trump was pushing in a fascist direction. And so then the vote came, Trump came in, and that whole movement went silent as the country is being dismantled, as we're losing the very civil liberties that allowed us to protest and to advocate for Palestine. Because many of us were out there on the front lines advocating for Palestine. But we were doing that in a space where it gained momentum. And my argument has been, and it still needs to be researched to be more verified, but my argument has been that that type of stance undermined the student movement. It undermined the pressures that we put on the city council to stop investing in Israeli bonds. It undermined the whole BDS discourse that we had. It disiluded on so many levels the whole movement towards Palestine that was not only national, but it was global, and it involved the non-Muslims. We never had these discussions on Palestine ever in this country at the level that we were seeing them. We were seeing universities change policy. We were seeing politicians admit that there's a problem in Palestine. And then there was this push for Trump. And when that push came in, the discourse went in a completely different direction. It was almost like there was no strategic calculation as to what may be a possible scenario by going this route. And so I get the sentiment, I get the logic, but I'm with you that I don't get the current attitude. Because the sentiment was that there's a humanitarian crisis, there's a genocide going on, we need to stop this by whatever means we can. But then to come and to kind of still hold on and say, this was the best of routes. No, we're not talking about a scenario that is not concrete. We're seeing the outcome of that decision making. And the outcome of that decision making is having impact not only on the US, but globally, right? With the direction that this administration is going in. So the stance should have been like what we calculated was to try to remove Biden. And the outcome is not what we necessarily wanted. What we're seeing is not what we want. And now we need to take another turn. No, that's not what's being said in the rhetoric. What's being said that was the best of choice. All we have to do something about fascism. But in reality, there's nothing being done. So we're not thinking about what we call al-ma'alat in Sharia thinking, which is the outcomes of actions, so that we can weigh the harm and benefit out of possible scenarios that we take. We have to calculate the outcome of an action. Like in the Deen, we're not a people that is unscientific in this regard. So this was a very unscientific approach that was taken. And it was taken not only, like, and I'm not the only one that has this position. There's others like Dr. Khalid Abul Fadl, who was a lawyer at UCLA and other universities for a long time, Muslim scholar actually as well. And he was saying this was a protest vote, and he made it the case that the Muslims took this direction because of their LGBT stance, right? They went right wing. It wasn't only Palestine, but they were trying to kind of kill two birds with one stone, and I would say even three. I would say that Muslims were thinking about taxes, they were thinking about LGBT, they were thinking about Palestine, but they were not thinking about anything else. They were not thinking about the impact on civil society. They were not thinking about the reality of what about if Trump continues the Palestine policy that was under Biden. As a matter of fact, Biden continued what Trump started when Trump was first president. Remember that Trump changed the capital in Palestine.
That's not
Remember?
all. That's right. That's not all he did.
Yes, but
He-
so it's like we were kind of isolating Biden, but not realizing also that we were dealing with Trump's policies as well at that time. So I think what I'm learning from this is that we have, and this is kind of what I was saying in the live that I did in my car, that we have to really think about what is our political stance intentionally, right? We can't afford, like for instance, in from my limited understanding in South African history, some Muslims supported apartheid, while others struggled against it. You understand what I'm saying? And then it's like then the question came about, like, so what kind of society were those who were supporting apartheid? What kind of society were they envisioning and advocating for? Versus those who went against apartheid, what kind of society were they envisioning, and what kind of society were they working for towards? And we're in the same situation now, because we are talking about going to kind of an apartheid type of society. There is an intentional move to erase Black history. There's an intentional move to erase indigenous history. A matter of fact, the whole diversity effort that people struggled for was just labeled as an LGBT problem. But no, there was other, the inclusive nature of the workplace was to build a more just society. And it included also including Muslims, right? So I want to pause there and say that I have the same sentiment, but I think that we cannot continue to have this type of political approach because it's really not thought out. It's reactionary, right? It's a very reactionary type of approach. And we're thinking that other people are going to build the society for us and we're not going to have to do work. We also forget that we live in a world of diversity where there's people of different religions, people of different ethical standings and orientations, right? So we have to learn how to deal with all of this diversity. We can't just think that everybody's going to line up and kind of fall or conform to what we want them to conform to. The other thing is that in many ways with this type of approach, we have destroyed those that have been our relationship with those that have been in solidarity with us, right? We kind of backtrack. So many people were in solidarity with us, and we took a position to undermine that solidarity. They were working with us, they were struggling with us, and then we turn around and support an administration which undermines all of that work.
Well, to be fair, and as objective in our analysis as we can be, I think it's important to point out that Muslims were not alone in making the mistake that was made.
Right.
One of the arguments I've been hearing quite a bit as part of the pushback for my view on where we are now and my critique of Sami Hamdi and on this one issue and some of his supporters that have the same mindset or the same perspective on this issue as he does. My pushback is, their pushback is that, and I've been hearing this a lot lately, Muslims weren't Muslims aren't the ones responsible for Harris losing the election. You know, we don't have the kind of numbers that could make that kind of difference. We did not, you know, we just did not give the, we weren't numerous enough to give the election to Trump. And my counter argument has been that, and this comes from the analysis that I and others have done, very objective analysis on the numbers. The popular vote was close between Harris and Trump. Trump got the edge in the popular vote, but it was close. He ran away with the Electoral College. He won every one of the battleground states. So he just swept the Electoral College, and that is what gave him the election. He swept it. And when you do an analysis of, you know, those battleground states and the numbers of Muslims within those states and the close proximity of votes among non-Muslims between, you know, Harris and Trump in a number of those battleground states. You know, Muslims were the deciding factor in a number of states where, again, the numbers between the two were close among non-Muslims, but the Muslims incensed over Gaza, understandably so, equated Harris with Biden, and, you know, it was genocide Biden and you know, genocide Harris. And that the election was won, in my humble opinion, on two bases. I mean, there's no question about it that Palestine was a dominant factor in the way that, you know, the dominant edge that Trump ended up with. There's no question about it. And not just coming from Muslims, but also coming from our allies, which were many in the non-Muslim community. Among the non-Muslims, we had many, many allies that were right with us, that were sickened by the genocide, and that were sold on the idea that there was no difference between Biden and Harris. There's no difference between the two. Genocide Joe, genocide Kamala, and, you know, subhanAllah, you know, again, votes went to Trump, and then there were votes that went to, you know, the third party candidates that were in the race, the Green Party and our brother, the professor out of New York, and then also those who just decided to stay at home, not to vote at all.
Right.
And so all of this factored into, and also, you know, on the other side, you know, you had, you know, this young tide of voters that were under the influence of Charlie Kirk, you know, and that bandwagon that was, you know, pushing hard. I mean, you had this confluence of all these things that took place that ended up giving Trump the vote. But Gaza, I have no doubt at all that Gaza was the dominant issue that made the difference in that 2024 election. Gaza was the dominant issue, and while we should have been upset, we deserve to be upset. You know, we weren't strategic in our thinking, because, as you pointed out, rightly so, Trump and those who were supporting Trump. In fact, the Zionists in Israel wanted Trump to win. They wanted him to win.
Yes.
They
They
made it very
openly said,
clear they wanted
yes.
him to win. And why? Because they knew that in addition to what he did for them before, not just, you know, making Jerusalem, the whole of Jerusalem, the capital of Israel, which is what they had been wanting for quite some time, the way that he pushed and cajoled and exerted pressure on compromised Arab Muslim leaders, you know, to become part and parcel of the Abraham Accords,
Yes.
and everything that went along with that, just normalization with the apartheid state while it was engaged in ethnic cleansing,
Right.
and you know, and a slow genocide, of our brothers and sisters in Gaza and beyond. Subhanallah, you know, this man and those who were supporting him, it was very, very clear, you know.
Yeah, and that approach, they knew that if they can undermine the liberal left in this country, that they would curb support, popular support from the American public, and it would allow them to reassert themselves in American institutions. It was extremely strategic. As a matter of fact, the push toward the right has been ongoing for a while because it was part of this strategy. It was part of this strategy to undermine the left, because the left overall globally was becoming extremely critical
Mhm,
of the situation in Palestine. And it was developing very sophisticated arguments that allowed an understanding of how the machine works in terms of funding, in terms of policy creation, in terms of media manipulation. Right, there was a whole apparatus that was generated that served in educating people on uh, how it is that Israeli occupation works, and a
mhm,
lot of that resistance was coming from the left and university campuses. We saw a lot of that, to the point where a lot of what we witnessed coming out of Harvard was coming out of one of America's top law schools. It was coming out of one of the U.S.'s top law schools. So you had a whole generation of lawyers that were completely taking the fight to the Israeli lobby and to Zionism itself as it operates on the legal level. That was all undermined. And to show you that there was an intentional move towards that, we began to see the way some of the top lawyers were dealing with the endowments at Harvard, how they started to try to control the money to shut down the student movement. And I still make the same argument that the direction that we went undermined the student movement, and the student movement picked up where the street stopped. The street went only so far, street protests, and when the street protests started dying down, the student movement picked up, and the student movement was having it was having magnificent results in terms of its impact, right? And so even our allies, like for instance George Voices for Peace, were doing so much work on the ground, and then they were somewhat shut down as well, right? They were shut down by the right wing Israelis. So I think that even saying voting for Trump was a strategy is all understandable, but it's the current psychology right now that I'm having an issue with. I may not agree with what took place, but it's the current stance that we have right now, which is the problem, right? I think the more that we can do a historical analysis and we can get into the what ifs and stuff like that, but it's the current attitude that is there right now, the lack of solidarity that is actually being showed by some in the Muslim community toward families that are being torn apart by the current racist immigration policy that we see. That lack of solidarity, it's extremely problematic to me, right? And the failing to see that if we continue to support the right wing, we're going to be undermined. And people say, well, that doesn't mean that we go immediately into the hands of the Democrats. Well, the reality is that if we don't figure out how we're going to take a position, we're just going to end up back in the same problematic zone in the next set of elections. And we don't even know actually what's coming next, because there was a threat on the part of Trump of staying in office. You know, we have to wait to the elections to see if he will leave office.
Mhm. Well, you know, on the optimism side, I don't see the I don't see the student movement and the other agitation that has been going on in the streets of America as having collapsed. It's still there. I'm still seeing it. It's just not as it's not as um,
Pronounced.
it's not as pronounced as it was. But then this is to be expected. I mean, there is no struggle that takes place at the same tempo, you know, without let up. I mean, there's an ebb and flow in struggle, and I'm still seeing activism around Gaza. I'm still seeing activism around concerns about where this country is headed politically, socially, and politically. I'm still seeing activism around this. I'm seeing the videos. I'm hearing the reports.
I agree with you. I agree with you, Hajj. The thing is that where I'm looking at is that the momentum, we contributed to the decline of the momentum, and that's a strategic blunder. And that's the thing that I'm trying to see. How can we adjust that so it doesn't happen again? How can we take this as an opportunity to be a people of justice, and not just a people that just focus on just us, but to be a people of justice for society and humanity as a whole? That's the thing that I keep coming back down to, that as Muslims, like, you know, the apartheid fighters in South Africa, they had to make that decision. Are we just for us, or are we for society as a whole, in terms of what is good, in terms of what is fair, what's just, what's equitable, was what will realize the dignity of the human being? That's the issue that I have. And the other,
There were Muslims. There
huh?
have been Muslims. Muslims have been deeply involved in the struggle, Aki.
Yes,
Muslims have been deeply involved in the struggle. We've not been absent. I mean, on the college and university campuses and in communities, Muslims, young Muslims, have been very involved.
right. But young Muslims, the important thing is here. I'm not negating that in any way. But what I'm saying is that those movements were not movements that we spearheaded. And I thank those
Mm.
from our non-Muslims uh, comrades, those that we're in solidarity with, that they created a space that we can operate with them. But we ourselves were critiquing, the Muslim community was criticizing the youth. The Muslim community wanted these youth to pull away from these groups.
Only,
And
only, not all of the Muslims.
not all. I'm not saying it as an all statement, but what I'm saying is that our direction has to change, in the sense that we have to be more clear on what direction we're going in,
Right,
and how it is that we're articulating it. Because
right.
what's happening is that the activists are being left out there on their own. I mean, some Muslim youth were being sent to protest at city halls. There was no bail money for them. There was no real adult supervision. I was watching this. I was there with them.
Mm.
And so I told the community, I said, okay, you want your children to protest, then you need to go the whole round. We need to have bail money for them, because the direction they're going in, they may get locked up.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? We need to be serious about the type of approach that we're taking.
Mm-hmm.
So that's all I'm saying is, let's articulate a better position. Let's
Okay.
clarify the direction. Let's
Okay.
be more strategic. Let's be more in solidarity with others. Let's recognize human dignity, right? Let's start being the voice of those that enjoy the good and forbid the evil, for humanity, not just for ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
I think that summarizes my position.
Okay. All right. And I agree that we must do better. I mean, there are areas that we can do better in as a community, as Muslims in the United States of America, and we must do better, especially um, our organizations, our institutions, our masajid and centers, especially those that are, of good size and of good resource, well situated, in a position to be able to, if nothing else, quietly, if that's what's needed, because of the fear factor, quietly provide the kind of material support that's needed for the the young ones and those beyond the young who are willing to go out into the streets and to organize, to be able to do that. It's very important.
And also our party politics. If we're going to go into party politics, we can't afford to take the same approaches that we have been taking.
Mm-hmm.
We have to be more strategic, more involved. It can't just be that we just give somebody the vote.
Yes.
Because that's basically what we're doing. So now we're facing a whole new set of challenges, that we have all these Muslim mayors now. We have Muslim mayors across the country now.
And this is a good thing. I mean, one of the things that came out of this precedent-setting mayoral election in New York City is, I remember seeing a report that said about 4,000 young Democrats registered for public office, inspired by what happened in New York City. And so, everything is not, dark and gloom. There are rays of light, and there are encouraging signs that things are happening on the ground among people of all strata who are concerned about where this country is headed and are determined to do something about it. And so that's something to be optimistic about. And what we want to do is encourage, especially our young, and those who are in the United States as full citizens, to not be afraid to, utilize their energy, their creativity, to be, one of the points of positive difference in this country. And those of us who are older, those of us who are well situated, centers that are well established, we have an obligation to do as much as we can to support them in whatever way they need support. Would you agree?
I agree with that. And I think that we need to raise the bar on political education. I agree that the youth, contrary to what many are saying, the youth are actually bringing hope.
Yes.
Because they themselves are believing that there's a possibility for change. They're coming from a different set of experiences. I agree with that 100%.
Okay.
I'm just more critical on the orientation that we have. Like, we keep entrenching ourselves in the orientation, which if we just modify it a little bit, we can probably make more strides.
Mm-hmm.
And we definitely, like, for me, behind this, and I want to mention this because
this will be your final thought, Aki, because we are at the end of our broadcast. Go ahead.
A lot of people, from coming from a Latino background, I was seeing what's going on in the community. I was seeing the personalized videos. I was seeing the abuse. I was watching the conversations. I was seeing the raids. So I would like to see that Muslims are not just saying we're suffering, but they say, look, humanity is suffering.
That's right. Absolutely. I'm with you 1,000%, brother. Injustice anywhere, as Dr. King said, is a threat to justice everywhere. We cannot pick and choose what issues of oppression we're going to concern ourselves about. We must be concerned across the board and see how all of these are tied into each other. Inshallah ta'ala. So on that note, brother, we had some other issues that I wanted to deal with in today's broadcast toward the end, but we've utilized all the time. It was a good conversation, a very important one. May Allah ta'ala bless those of us who saw it live, those of us who will see it later, to benefit from something that was said in it. And I thank you for your time and the attention that you gave this very important issue today, my brother. May Allah ta'ala bless the rest of your day. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Close out as we normally do. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim wal asr. Inna al-insana lafi khusr. Illa alladhina amanu wa amalu salihati wa tawassaw bil haqq wa tawassaw bis sabr. Which means, in the translation of the meaning, in the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful, by the token of time through the ages, surely humanity is in loss, except those who believe and do good, and exhort one another to truth, and exhort one another to patiently persevere. Peace be unto you. Assalamu alaikum.